When I meet Arab leaders, they tell me about their fears from Iran. So it's not about Israel and Iran, it is not about the Middle East and Iran, it is about the entire world and Iran.
Well, that's Israel's United Nations Ambassador Danny Danon telling me about the continued threat from Iran. Worries that he says that are shared by Iran's Arab neighbors and many others beyond the region. And that concern now, it seems, is only growing as President Trump warns that Tehran, in his view, is not sticking to the spirit of the Iranian nuclear deal. Well, the administration did certify that Iran is complying. It is reviewing the agreement in light of Iran's continued support of terrorism, its ballistic missile tests, and meddling in Syria. So, should the deal be reviewed? Ambassador John Bolton is with us. He's the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, a Fox News contributor, senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and chairman of the Gatestone Institute here in New York. Ambassador, good to see you here in the studio.
Glad to be with you.
Now, the administration has given Tehran the seal of approval. Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, did that this week, saying, certifying that technically Iran is cooperating with the Iranian nuclear agreement and is filling its responsibilities. But there's a big but, and that's Iran's behavior.
Yeah, I think that certification was a fundamental mistake. I have reason to believe it was not entirely cleared at the White House, so one might more properly call it the State Department's certification. And I think Secretary Tillerson was given very poor advice to send that letter. Number one, I think it's perfectly clear that Iran has violated the deal in multiple respects, and that's just what we can tell from publicly available information.
Which points?
Well, for example, they have denied the International Atomic Energy Agency access to military sites. They have exceeded the limits of heavy water production. They've exceeded the uranium enrichment limits. They've flatly violated virtually every aspect of the ballistic missile provisions of the Security Council resolution and the annexes to it. And that's just for starters. How much cooperation has Iran been engaged in with North Korea? So interestingly, of course, the State Department did not need to certify compliance or certify noncompliance. If you read the statute carefully, they simply could have said, we're not in a position to certify one way or the other, which would have been the sort of neutral ground. So when President Trump says correctly that Iran is not complying with the spirit of the deal, he could well have gone further and said they're not complying with the letter of the deal either.
But if Iran is not, as you say and point out, you know, the devil is always in the details in these type of agreements, then why would the State Department say they're fine? The
State Department has a genetic problem with calling out foreign nations that violate their agreements. I've seen it myself in case after case, and this is something I think that Congress needs to explore. But over the longer term, I think the administration is signaling very clearly, at least in the words of President Trump, he still thinks this is a rotten deal. It is. It's a diplomatic debacle for the United States.
And then this week there was a revelation from one of the main resistance group, the National Council of Resistance of Iran. They held a press conference about Parchin. They say there is evidence that there is secret nuclear-related evidence and research going on in the Parchin site. What about that? That's the group that first revealed the nuclear issue long ago.
Yeah, well, this is important new information, and it should get wider attention than it has. I can say with respect to the MEK, I first heard about them about 15, 16 years ago, as you say, when they were releasing information about Iran's nuclear weapons program. And in that entire period of time, I have never seen them make a material mistake about what they've said. Some things we've not been able to verify, but when they talk about these, what are called possible military dimensions of the Iranian program, they've laid out again in extraordinary detail the organization of the continuing military effort and activities that obviously violate Iran's commitment not to try and obtain nuclear weapons. Indeed, the way this agreement is worded, they reaffirm their commitment never to seek it, which of course they've been violating for about 30 years. So I think this is just another example of how widespread the evidence is that Iran has been violating this agreement since before the ink was dry.
So bottom line, you think that Iran is cheating and has been cheating, and what do you predict in terms of its nuclear program, and what should we do about the Iranian deal that Prime Minister Netanyahu told Shawn the other day that it should be, in his words, repealed and replaced? What should happen with this agreement?
Well, I'd strike the replace part. I would have abrogated this deal just about 100 days ago. It's a strategic mistake for the United States. People say, well, we should try and enforce it strictly. That's not possible. It's so badly worded. It'd be like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. I've said, if I were teaching a course on international negotiations at a law school and had this as an exercise, and the negotiating teams had come back with this deal, I'd flunk the American team. That's how bad it is.
Well, President Obama and Secretary of State Kerry, they hailed and praised the deal, said it will prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear bomb.
It will facilitate Iran obtaining nuclear capabilities. Even if they complied with it at the end of the terms of the deal, they'll be closer to it. They're not complying with it. We need to keep asking the question, what other information is there? And after 8 years of Obama politicization of our intelligence services, I suspect there's a lot more there than we know publicly.
All right, Ambassador John Bolton, good to see you in the studio. Thank you so much. I guess like everything, it's in the fine print. You got to read that asterisk and all those pages, so we'll see how this develops. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.